Welcome everyone. My name is Camille and I'm a volunteer with a non-profit organization called Share International. Share International is a network of people who have come into certain information that resonated strongly with them so that they wanted to share it with other people. We offer a particular spiritual perspective on the state of the world to give context to the unstable times that we're going through, and a message that despite all of our difficulties, a very good future is possible for us. So we give talks like this one, we participate in fairs and expos, and we practice a type of meditation called transmission meditation. So today I'm going to be focusing on the evolution of humanity and presenting a narrative of our long history to the critical point that we're at now and the kind of progress that is possible for us in the future. The information that we offer is based on the Ageless wisdom teachings, which is an ancient knowledge and teachings which underlie all the world's major religions, as well as our cultural and social achievements. It's a vast body of information that comes from our spiritual kingdom, also called the spiritual hierarchy, to prepare us for the time we're in now. Certain members of the spiritual hierarchy, known as Masters of Wisdom, work with a few spiritually advanced people to release some of the previously hidden esoteric teachings to the general public. Helena Blavatsky, Alice Bailey, and Helena Rurik each had a close rapport with at least one master, and each of them wrote a series of books detailing systems, cycles, and information that lie beyond humanity's reach. The Ageless wisdom offers descriptions of the universe and man's place in it. And the purpose of these teachings is to bring about right human relations here on earth. The Masters of Wisdom are the custodians of these teachings, allowing only what humanity is ready for at any given time. The information in my talk comes mainly from Benjamin Krem, the founder of Share International. He also had a close telepathic rapport with the Master, and he regarded himself as a messenger. He spent over 40 years giving talks and interviews in many countries, and he published 18 books containing the most recent information about Maitreya, the world teacher, and his plans to merge directly and interface directly with humanity. In this talk, I'm going to be making statements and descriptions about the macrocosmic, the invisible, the intangible, and things that have not yet happened. I cannot prove what I will be saying. I leave it to you to decide if what I say makes sense to you or has the ring of truth to it. It might fly in the face of everything that you know and believe. That's okay. I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. This is all for your consideration only. I do ask that you try, as much as you're able to listen with an open mind, which is harder than it may seem. But one way you can try to do that is to imagine placing all that you know and believe in a bag and setting it down next to you so as to allow our information into your minds. Know that at any time you can pick up and resume carrying your beliefs as before. We mean well and wish to bring a sense of hope for the present and the future time. Generally speaking, when people talk about human evolution, they are referring to the evolution of the physical body and how it has changed due to environmental conditions and genetic mutation. There's plenty of information out there describing this. Darwin's theory of natural selection has given us an understanding of how humans have evolved out of the animal kingdom. Geneticists have refined and expanded our understanding of how traits change and get passed down. And more recently, the study of epigenetics has given us the nuances of how the expression of genes get turned on and off. As valuable as these findings are, we only have a partial picture of ourselves. We're limited in how much information we can gather from the fossils and artifacts we find. We're also limited by the level of science and technology, our conditioning, and what we're able to perceive. Our current science is based in the lowest three levels of the physical plane. We can detect, measure, and study solid, liquid, and gaseous matter. Anything above that is out of reach for us to study with our current scientific methods. There are higher levels of matter that factor into the constitution of humanity. We are not yet able to detect these higher levels of matter or the spiritual underpinnings that bring about the world that we see and study. So I would like to present a description of human evolution from an esoteric perspective, so as to offer a picture of how we have evolved in both form and consciousness, because human beings are comprised of both matter and spirit. To begin with, the ageless wisdom posits that humanity exists throughout cosmos, and that every life form is on its way to becoming human, is human, or has gone beyond being human into more evolved states of being. With that in mind, humankind's presence on this planet is not a peculiarity. Our information is that all the planets in our solar system are inhabited by people, but they are living at the etheric levels of the physical plane. These are the four higher subplanes of the physical plane above solid, liquid, and gas. Humanity's presence on this earth was manifested by our Planetary Logos, a great cosmic being that ensouls our planet, which in itself is a living, breathing entity. This Planetary Logos created a plan for the development of all life here, the creation of the elements and the kingdoms. First to be laid down was the mineral kingdom, and then later the plant, and then the animal, the human, and the spiritual. Each kingdom grows out from the one below it. So the human kingdom grew out from the animal kingdom, and we are growing towards and into the spiritual kingdom. There are 7 cosmic planes of existence that range from the finest spiritual level to the densest material level. And a human being is comprised of these planes in 3 parts. Manifesting at the monadic level is our divine self, also called the monad or the spark of God. This is our spiritual side, and this is who we are essentially are. We are essentially divine beings. But at this level, the vibration is so refined that it cannot manifest directly onto the physical plane. So an intermediary soul is placed at the higher level of the mental plane, also called the causal plane. So this is our soul, this is our higher self, or our causal body. The soul steps down the qualities of the spark of God and is also the storage place for all of our incarnational experiences. To experience life on the physical plane on earth, the soul creates and uses a vehicle which is born into the world. This is also called our personality, our lower self, or our physical plane man. This vehicle is comprised of 3 bodies. There's the physical body, made from the physical plane. There's the astral or emotional body, made from matter of the astral plane. and a mental body made from mental matter. Scientists and paleontologists estimate humanity to be somewhere between 300,000 years old and 2.8 million years old, depending on how they define human. Our information is that humanity actually began 18.5 million years ago. The first group of human souls incarnated into animal man bodies and made up the Lemurian root race. The Lemurian root race had the task of developing and perfecting the physical body, with the astral and mental bodies present but as yet undeveloped. Over a period of approximately 6 million years, the human form evolved to become more and more distinct from the animal kingdom that it came from. Following the Lemurians came the Atlantean root race, whose task it was to develop and perfect the astral body, with the mental body as yet undeveloped. Over a span of approximately 12.5 million years, they did this so well that even today, for the vast majority of the population, our consciousness remains largely centered in the astral body. At approximately 100,000 years old, the Aryan root race, having nothing to do with Hitler's use of that word, has the goal of developing and perfecting the mental body. First the lower mind, having to do with concrete thought and reasoning, and then later on the higher mind, having to do with abstract thought and intuition. Our present science and technology is a demonstration of the achievement of lower mind. Throughout all of this time that we've been here, we have always had the help and guidance of the spiritual kingdom. In Lemurian and Atlantean times, the masters used to live among humanity to teach and influence along beneficial lines. This changed towards the end of the Atlantean period, when a divide grew between those who were following the spiritual path and the masters, and those who had become enthralled by materiality and greed. A war between these two opposing sides culminated in the sinking of Atlantis and the withdrawal of hierarchy from direct contact with humanity. Since then, spiritual stimulation has gone on, but it has been more indirect, with the masters working from remote desert and mountain regions of the world. Masters of wisdom evolved out of the human kingdom, having treaded the same path that we are all on. All of us will eventually evolve into masters. These elder brothers of ours, or lords of compassion as they're sometimes called, have mastery on the physical, the astral and mental planes. Their consciousness is centered above that in the Buddhic or love-wisdom plane. And from there, the oneness of everything can be directly perceived. They are loving, compassionate, wise, harmless, and without fault. These masters know and live within spiritual laws, and one of these laws is that human free will is sacrosanct. They do not ever infringe a person's free will. There are 63 masters in the Earth's spiritual kingdom that oversee the evolution of humanity and the lower kingdoms according to the plan set by the Planetary Logos. They do this by managing the various energies that impinge the planet to protect and stimulate us towards growth and unfoldment. They also place ideas into the mental plane that would advance life on Earth. Advanced, sensitive people can pick up on these ideas and try to bring them into the world. Inventions, artistic expressions, and social and cultural movements have been brought about in this way. It has not been unusual for people in different parts of the world to get the same idea and start working on it at about the same time. In regards to human evolution, the physical form is almost complete with the exception of etheric vision, which will eventually develop and become commonplace. Human evolution at this point is mainly about expanding consciousness and the growing ability to express our spiritual side while in physical form. For this to happen, the soul must establish contact with its vehicle, and a steady connection must be built between the two so that the soul may influence the vehicle. Control must eventually be achieved over the three bodies of the personality. This means that in time the person must overcome the appetites of the physical body, the desires of the astral body, and the illusions of the mental body. The more control a person has over themselves at these three levels, the more the soul is able to express its divine qualities through the personality. There are 5 initiations that mark the progress of the human being. The first 3 involve control of the physical, the astral, and the mental bodies. By the 4th initiation, the person has raised its vibration enough so that the intermediary soul is no longer needed and is reabsorbed back up into the monad. From then on, it's the spark of God, the monad, works directly through the personality. At the 5th initiation, the person stands completely free from the pull of matter and no longer needs to incarnate on earth. It actually takes eons for the soul to even begin to have any influence on its vehicle, because the matter that makes up the personality, which is concerned with self-preservation, is not very responsive to the spiritual impulses of the soul, whose nature is to serve others. But once contact starts to happen, the soul will try to bring its vehicle into some form of meditation in order to build a more steady connection between them. While this is proceeding, there's a dichotomy. The dichotomy of spiritual and material impulses creates friction within the person, and it's that friction that eventually brings out the expansion of consciousness, as the person has to struggle to reconcile or choose which impulse to follow. We can speed up our progress through the practice of meditation and service. Meditation strengthens the connection between the soul and the personality, and service to others helps develop positive traits that reflect the nature of the soul. There are 2 spiritual laws that support evolution and make it possible for us to transition from a physically self-centered being to a spiritually centered and service-oriented being. The first is the law of rebirth or reincarnation. Under this law, the soul incarnates hundreds of thousands of times in a long succession of human bodies, both as men and as women, experiencing a wide variety of locations, cultures, and conditions. In this way, we accumulate experiences and abilities, we develop good qualities, and we grow in consciousness. This law gives us as much time as we need complete to evolve at whatever path, at whatever pace we choose. The other law is that of karma, or cause and effect. And simply put, every thought that we have and action we take set into motion a cause which has effects. These effects make up our lives for good or for ill, Through this law, we learn to live in right human relationship and become harmless to others. In addition to managing the energies and placing ideas into the mental plane, from time to time the spiritual kingdom will send a great teacher into the world to educate directly. Teachers from the past include Hermes, Zoroaster, Mithra, Buddha, Krishna, Jesus, and Muhammad. Each one brought some important idea or lesson for humanity to absorb and put into practice. These teachers come when humanity is ready, in times of crisis, and during transitions between ages. For instance, Jesus came to inaugurate the age of Pisces 2,000 years ago. Today, we are living in a time when all three conditions are playing out. We are facing a series of overlapping crises: climate change, the COVID pandemic, the rise of fascism, war and violence, refugees, huge wealth disparity, racial and other forms of injustice. Benjamin Creme has said that we are experiencing a spiritual crisis that is focused through the political and economic fields. That spiritual crisis can only be resolved by the resolution of our political and economic problems, which are based on a false sense of separation. If we would evolve, develop as a race, we must realize our oneness, that we are brothers and sisters of one family, under the one divine source, and identical with that source. We are also transitioning to a new age, and this is part of a cycle that occurs every 2100 years or so. Each cosmic age brings certain energies and qualities that shape the societies created during that time. Transitions between ages are chaotic as the old energies wane and that the systems created during that time break down. It is challenging to adjust to the new energies and create systems that reflect the qualities of the new age. We're leaving the age of Pisces, who gave us the qualities of individuality, idealism, and devotion. Pisces took humanity out of the herd mentality that we had 2,000 years ago and turned us into individualistic beings who can more or less think for ourselves. And this has been a big evolutionary step forward. It has also created a great deal of division, fragmentation, and fanaticism in the world. The Aquarian age that we have entered is the age of synthesis. As Benjamin Creme described it, synthesis means the drawing together and creation of oneness, a unity out of disparate parts. You will find that is the aim of the evolutionary process. Unity in diversity, the greatest diversity in the fullness of unity. At this time, Piscean and Aquarian energies are of a similar strength, but with each day that passes, Aquarian energy is growing stronger and Piscean energy is growing weaker. And thirdly, the masters know that humanity is ready and longing for change. The proof of this is that more and more people are waking up and responding to our various crises. They have been coming together, uniting around important causes, and finding their power to effect change. These are the people who are responding to the Aquarian energies and trying to find fairer ways to do things. It is the effort of this diverse body of people that indicates to the masters that enough people would be responsive to a great teacher. The rise of people power has been a very important development. So what we are experiencing now are the mounting tensions brought about by our spiritual crisis focused in the political and the economic realms, and the tension due to the schism between people who are responding to Aquarian energies and those who are holding on to the old Piscean ways. If left on our own to deal with this impasse, it is questionable and very uncertain whether we would be able to figure out and build in the needed Aquarian structures in the short amount of time that we need them. But we are not alone, and a great teacher is indeed in the process of entering the everyday world to give us inspiration and guidance. This teacher's name is Maitreya, and this time he is not coming alone, but with a large group of masters who will also emerge and live amongst humanity. Maitreya is the head of the spiritual kingdom and the master of all the masters. As the head, he fills the position of world teacher and Christ. As Christ, he embodies the Christ principle, which is love. And he demonstrates this love moment to moment, unconditionally for everyone on the planet. Maitreya fulfills the expectations that the major religions have for the return of a great teacher, each under a different name. He is here for people of all religions and of no religion. He is also not here to found a new religion, but simply here as a teacher in the broadest sense. Maitreya is deeply attuned to the state of humanity, experiencing on the one hand the divinity and the joy that is everyone's birthright to have, while at the same time knowing intimately suffering experienced by those, especially the poorest and the starving millions. Our information is that 1/3 of the world usurps and wastes 3/4 of the world's food and 83% of the world's resources, leaving the other 2/3 to make do with 25% of the food and even less of the resources. This creates very dire conditions for a large swath of the population. According to the World Food Program Hunger Map, over 800 million people are undernourished. Regarding this degree of poverty, Maitreya has said, throughout the world there are men, women, and little children who have not even the essentials to stay alive. They crowd the cities of many of the poorest countries in the world. This crime fills me with shame. My brothers, how can you watch these people die before your eyes and call yourselves men? My plan is to save these, my little ones, from certain starvation and needless death. Maitreya has also said, I come to show you the way forward into a simpler, saner, happier life together. No longer man against man, nation against nation, but together, as brothers, shall we go forth into the new country, the country of love, the country of trust, of beauty and freedom. Maitreya's priorities include correct food, clean water, shelter, education, and health care for all. There is currently no place on earth where all of these things are regarded and available as a natural human right. One has to be able to afford these things. Also, of great urgency is the need to resuscitate and restore the planet. It is very sick, and our survival is very much connected with the survival of the planet. And Maitreya is also here to show us how to live in peace. This is something we've never been able to do before, but he says it is possible. How do we get To have peace, we must have justice. there cannot be justice if half of the world is in poverty. The tension created between the developed and developing nations have the seeds within them for a third world war, which would be nuclear. Creating justice, on the other hand, would end war. To get justice requires the creation of trust. When there's trust between people, things that are impossible to do without it become possible. To create trust, share the resources of the world equitably. Maitreya will present a very sensible and practical way to accomplish this. There is actually no other way to resolve the tensions that we are experiencing in the world. Sharing the resources is key. In June of 1945, Maitreya announced that he would return to the everyday world from his retreat when humanity, of its free will, starts to take steps towards putting its house in order. As soon as our minds and actions are moving in the directions of creating peace and justice in a sharing-based economy, he would come at the earliest possible moment. He had hoped that World War II had chastened us and that he would be able to come within a few years. But the nations resumed their old competitive nationalistic ways, and so he could not come forward. 32 years later, in July of 1977, he decided to come whether we were ready or not. So Maitreya left his Himalayan retreat in a self-created body called a Maya Virupa. Having knowledge and mastery of the planes of matter, he created this body out of light, which looks like a normal human being, but is indestructible. He designed this body to be resilient enough to live at our level of vibration, and yet sensitive enough so that he can bring through the energies and send them out as he needs to. To adjust the physical plane living, he spent 3 days in Pakistan, and then he took a plane to London, where the Asian community there became his base in the modern world. His activity over these 45 years is too extensive to completely cover, but his work in various directions have been bringing about changes and conditions in the world that would allow him to emerge without infringing our free will. He has been presenting his ideas, priorities, and concerns in various ways. Early on, he gave 140 messages through Benjamin Creme by way of mental telepathy. These messages were recorded and published in a book. Since 2010, he has been giving television interviews all over the world under an assumed name to present himself as an ordinary man with some ideas. This is so that people will hear and respond to him honestly and not get caught up in his identity. Many millions have seen him by now. And here's a partial list of the countries that he has been in. Benjamin Creme, who used to give us updates on his whereabouts, is no longer around. But since 2016, I'm sure this list of countries would be much, much longer. He has also been working behind the scenes to effect positive change and bring peace between nations whenever possible. His efforts and influence brought about the end of the Cold War and the fall of the Berlin Wall in the late 1980s, and the release of Nelson Mandela from 27 years in prison, and the end of South African apartheid in the 90s. He's also been flooding the world with his energies, and this has been creating a lot of change in the world. As the embodiment of the Christ principle, or the energy of love, he pours this energy into the world continuously. This has certain effects on the way people think and act. It stimulates and accentuates everything, the good and the bad, the altruistic and the greedy, the inclusive and the non-inclusive. This is creating a clear, sharp distinction in the world between two opposing lines of action that humanity will have to choose from. This phenomenon is called the sword of cleavage. It has been bringing all the hidden, unconscious muck up to the surface so that we may see it for what it is and decide what to do with it. As Benjamin Creme explained, there are people who pretend to themselves that they are selfless and all for the good of the world, but at the basis of their life they are greedy and selfish. The sword of cleavage cuts through this hypocrisy and shows people in their true light. So we can see clearly that if we go one way, it will make for total disaster. If we go another, it will make for the generation of a new world. Another energy pouring onto the planet is the energy of peace and equilibrium, which will in time turn the present chaos into its opposite. In 2001, Maitreya manifested a three-dimensional image of a handprint on a bathroom mirror in Barcelona, which was photographed. Benjamin Creme's master confirmed that by placing your hand on an image of this handprint, or by looking at it, Maitreya's help and healing can be invoked within the law of karma. This is a way that people can ask him for help until he emerges fully. At some point in the near future, Maitreya will step forward publicly and reveal who he is to the world. This event is coming closer, but certain conditions must be in place for him to do so. First, he must be invited to speak to the world. The millions of people who have seen his interviews must recognize his wisdom and make it known that they want to hear more from him. He must be asked to come forward and speak to us, thereby not infringing our free will. Also, secondly, the collapse of the world stock market and economy. This may be a difficult one for some to accept, especially if you are heavily invested in the current economy and stock market. But this economic system is so out of balance. It leaves millions out and traps them in poverty and distress. It is just not sustainable. A collapse is necessary in order for a more just system to be built that includes everyone. Any distress from this collapse would be temporary. Thirdly, humanity must be taking steps towards putting its house in order, our minds and our actions moving in the direction of creating peace, justice, sharing-based economy, and addressing climate change. This is happening. And there is a constant fluctuation of energies, forces, and the general state of humanity. Maitreya must take into account these complex variations and pick an optimal time that would offer the best outcome and the best reception from humanity. No one knows exactly when this will be. Maitreya revealing his identity to the world will be known as the Day of Declaration. As described by Benjamin Creme, this will take place globally on TV by linked satellite networks. This will not be a normal TV presentation, but an extraordinary experiential event. Firstly, his love will pour out on all the planes of matter in such a way that we would feel it physically, as if he is to embrace the whole world. This love will invoke within each of us a heartfelt response to his message. As he appears on the TV screen and gives his message, We will not see his mouth moving. Having the abilities that Maitreya does, he will be conveying his thoughts telepathically. Everyone over the age of 14 will hear him inwardly in their own language. He will give us a very brief history of ourselves, from our early animal man beginnings to now, and he will show us from what spiritual heights we have descended into this level of materiality. He will give us an experience of our innate divinity, and he will challenge that divinity by outlining the serious problems that we must address. He will present his case for sharing the world's resources fairly around the world and show us what it would look like if we did. He will state that the choice is ours to accept the principle of sharing, and thereby the help of himself and the masters, who we will also introduce, and create a beautiful new civilization, or continue along the destructive path that we are currently on towards our own definite and complete demise. In addition to these messages and experiences, there will be hundreds of thousands of miraculous healings. So through the worldwide, through the outpouring of his love, the telepathic communication that goes out worldwide, and the miraculous healings, will he demonstrate who he is, Maitreya, the world teacher, for the age of Aquarius. What happens next? We have a choice to make, and our response will determine the whole future of the earth. In his message to us on that day, and in the conditions brought about by the sword of cleavage leading up to that day, a very clearly laid out choice between two very different outcomes has been presented to us. If we reject Maitreya and the principle of sharing, which will lead to the destruction of ourselves and the planet, the possibility for further human advancement on Earth will come to an end. According to Benjamin Krem's master, if we go this route, by sticking to our competition, our greed and violence, our souls will be shipped to a very cold, dark planet at the outer edges of the solar system. On that planet, there will be no spiritual stimulation, and that life there would be endlessly hard and painful. On the other hand, accepting the principle of sharing would be taking a step into our divinity and seizing an opportunity for us to express a very important form of love, which is goodwill. A population that is as fragmented and deeply conditioned as we are will inevitably lead to yield a wide variety of responses to Maitreya's message. Some will fear him. Some will not know what to make of him. But Maitreya knows that he has at least 1.8 billion people who will respond positively to him and teach others to respond. It does not take the whole of humanity to accept Maitreya, but a certain proportion, critical mass, and this we already have. Regarding the choice that we will make, Maitreya has said, "My heart tells me your answer, your choice, and is glad." After the day of declaration, Maitreya will continue to galvanize, unify the growing numbers of people who want the creation of fair structures and the restoration of the planet. Unity is the strength of humanity, and it will be through this unified body of people that any obstruction to these desired goals will be overcome. Anyone in power, the ultra-wealthy, the governments, the corporations, will find themselves unable to withstand public pressure to change or get out of the way. Their time as manipulators of ideas market forces, and people will be brought to an end. There are high initiates who, with hierarchy, have worked out interrelated plans to solve the redistribution problems of the world. When the political will is there, they will be implemented. A United Nations department will be created and overseen by a master or high initiate for the distribution of resources, with a crash aid program for the starving millions as the very first problem to address. All countries will be asked to make an inventory of what it produces and what it needs. Anything in excess of a country's needs will go to a pool for the rest of the world. This department will manage the complexities of this new system. The next priority is to heal the planet and clean up the pollution we have created. Our relationship to nature will change to a more responsible one. Pollution, currently the #1 killer, will decrease as we alter our modes of living and switch to clean energy. Other priorities of Maitreya include the removal of guilt and fear, the cleansing of hearts and minds, education in the laws of life and love, beautification of the cities, removal of barriers to travel, and a pool of knowledge accessible to all. If we think about the law of karma, we know the ripple effects from a false sense of separation. Can you imagine the effects that would ripple out from a sense of oneness and unity? All aspects of life would transform. Imagine the relief from tension and stress that would happen if everyone knew that their basic needs would be met. The conditions that cause so much crime and war would no longer be there. Self-esteem and creativity could grow in its place. There's a theme sheet on the table called Promise of the Future that describes many of the positive changes that would take place in this kind of a future. There will eventually be around 40 masters who will externalize and live amongst humanity for the first time in 90,000 years, when they withdrew back in the Atlantean times. Maitreya will remain with us for the whole duration of the age of Aquarius. They will serve humanity as guides and advisors on matters of all kinds. And then it will be up to us whether to accept their guidance and act accordingly. We are the ones who will have to do the work of building the Aquarian structures and solving our problems. Their presence, wisdom, and advice will have a positive influence on us, and the evolution of humanity will begin to speed up. But we're not there yet, and this is still a time of great tension and turbulence. So I'm going to end with this parting quote from Maitreya. He says, "Be not afraid of the many problems which arise now almost daily in the world. These events are transient, and soon men will come to understand that they have before them a future bathed in light." Thank you very much.